Hello and welcome to another tropical update from Cayman Hurricane Center. I'm Adam McDoom, and it has been a very busy time. And to join me and assist me on this update, I have here David Tones. Thanks for joining, David.
Good to be here, but unfortunately the overall scene isn't good.
Indeed. But just before we get to the particulars on what's going on, want to quickly apologize for the absence of updates over the past few days. Things have become very chaotic and didn't really have the chance to get around to getting those updates up and out. But here we are, and what we'll do is that we will go back and review what has happened since the previous update, and then we'll continue on from here. So here on your screen is the previous track and wind field, as well as warning areas for Harvey. And this was taken a couple days ago, last week, Thursday, August 24th at about 1 a.m. And so basically what happened with Harvey is that Harvey had weakened down in the central Caribbean. Sort of the circulation partially opened up to a wave, so it didn't really dissipate but rather degenerated, and it moved off in a west to west northerly direction, causing some impacts to Jamaica, here in the Cayman Islands, as well as Honduras, parts of Belize, and the Yucatan. After crossing the Yucatan, the system started to get better organized and ended up redeveloping as a tropical storm once again in the southwestern or south central Gulf of Mexico, where the system then rapidly intensified into a major hurricane. And just playing this forward here, and again it started looking like it would be somewhat of a serious threat towards Texas, the south central area of Texas, and then eventually the track started shifting further and further east with the forecast. Thus, the threat area is spreading to more central to north to eastern Texas, and then on towards Louisiana. And just pointing out that it rapidly intensified into a Category 4 hurricane. So the first real major hurricane of the season, and not only surpassing Category 3 status, but also making it to a quite decent Category 4 hurricane. It then progressed to a landfall on Friday the 25th in the late night, where it made landfall exactly northern end of San Jose Island, or about 4 miles east of Rockport, as a Cat 4 hurricane. And the interesting thing with this system is that it did not just go into Texas and die. Well, the forecast became a little bit worrisome, as the system was then expected to stall near the coast, or just slightly inland in Texas and then eventually potentially make its way back offshore and then make secondary impacts to Louisiana. The system was able to maintain its hurricane status going inshore, weakened to tropical storm intensity, and was able to maintain tropical storm intensity throughout the rest of its life, partly due to brown sea effect. The amount of moisture that was already on land sort of produced this sea-like feature on land, thus the storm sensing it as it's like it's being over the sea and not weakening as it would usually do over land. Anyway, after the storm stalled out, it started to move back towards the east-southeast to southeast, where it then started to re-intensify as it came offshore, off of Texas, and then started to make its approach towards Louisiana. And then a few days later, going into Tuesday, 29th, it made its way back towards, looked like it was heading back towards the eastern part of Texas, the border regions. Then it kind of stalled out again for a short period, decided to move back a bit eastwards again. And this was very concerning because it was spending more and more time over open waters, thus allowing it to intensify more so. And again, much more of a higher rainfall threat and wind threat towards Louisiana than originally estimated. And, you know, the rainfall threat still continued through Texas, and even up to this point now, it's still having some serious impacts in Texas and Louisiana. Anyway, it had made landfall on Wednesday morning, and at this point, it's now making its way through central Louisiana. It has weakened down to now a tropical depression, and it is expected to continuously weaken and eventually get itself absorbed into another system and dissipate. But not before going through areas such as Arizona, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, and onwards towards the northeast. So what I'll do is that I'll go ahead and hand it over to David, who will take the screen and run through with you the present advisory on Tropical Depression Harvey, and he'll also run with you the impacts that has occurred over Texas and Louisiana. It's a very grim and sad time for those areas. Impacts in that area scenes which we have not seen since Hurricane Katrina some 12 years ago. And a matter of fact, with Harvey making landfall into Louisiana, pretty much almost on the day of 12 years to the day that Hurricane Katrina made landfall in Louisiana. Anyway, David, go on. Take it away.
Thanks, Adam. The Weather Prediction Center is now issuing the advisories on Tropical Depression Harvey, and I have their site up. Flooding rains continue across the far eastern Texas, western Louisiana, with heavy rainfall expected to spread northeastward through the lower Mississippi Valley and into the Tennessee Valley over the next day or two. The summary of 4:00 AM CDT or 09:00 UTC. Harvey, located 32.3 degrees north, 92.0 degrees west, about 15 miles south of Monroe, Louisiana, or about 65 miles north-northeast of Alexandria, Louisiana. Maximum sustained winds 30 miles per hour. Harvey's movement is in a north-northeasterly direction at 10 miles per hour, and central pressure is 998 millibars. Flash and flood warnings and watches are in effect from eastern Texas through parts of the lower Mississippi Valley into the western portions of the Tennessee Valley, the lower Ohio Valley. For information specific to your area, including possible watches and warnings, please monitor products issued by your local National Weather Service. So that is the position of Harvey. Rainfall. Harvey is expected to produce 3 to 5 inches of rain for far eastern Arkansas, northern Mississippi, northeastward, across the western to central Tennessee, including western to central Kentucky into southern Ohio. Likely higher totals of 6 to 10 inches possible across the far northern Mississippi, western Tennessee into southwest Kentucky. These rains will enhance the flash flooding risk across those areas, especially from far northern Mississippi, western Tennessee and into far southwest Kentucky. Flooding remains a critical issue, life threatening. In and around Houston, Beaumont, Port Arthur. We do know that the pumping station in Beaumont has broken down, and the flooding will also move eastward into southwest Louisiana for the rest of the week. The expected heavy rain spreading northeast from Louisiana into western Kentucky may also lead to flash flooding, increase river and small stream flooding. And please do not attempt to travel in the affected area. We have already seen a family of 6 in a motor vehicle end up off the road, and their bodies were located, retrieved earlier yesterday. And there are various rainfall totals, the breakdown, and this information is available on the Weather Prediction Centre site. And Adam, this is a look at the rainfall and the area in purple will be the highest area of risk. I think the yellow and the green would be lesser. So, still not a good picture for those in Harvey's path. We know that flooding is a major and ongoing issue, and about an hour before we did this update, information has come in that that chemical plant near to the Houston city has seen some explosions. A number of police officers have been injured. They've been taken to hospital, and the Federal Aviation Authority, I think I've got it right, have invoked a restriction over the plant due to possible further explosions. So Adam, that's the latest from me on Harvey.
Yep. David, let's go into a little bit of a discussion here about the impacts of Harvey and what it has done, and how we do compare it to other storms that have affected the United States. Again, I've been around. I've watched hurricanes like Katrina and Sandy and their impacts to land, and again, the issues there in Texas and Louisiana reminds me so much of Hurricane Katrina some 12 years ago. There's already some estimates that are out there that says that overall damage and stuff is worse than Katrina. And I mean, considering that Katrina made landfall in Louisiana as a weakening Cat 3, whilst Harvey made landfall as a strengthening Cat 4. I mean, thinking about that, obviously, the impacts would be slightly greater, but not only with the winds, but the main issue with storms is water. And there was a bit of storm surge, but the main thing from Harvey has been the flooding, the constant flooding, and as David mentioned, the roadways and dams and waterways have been flooded out completely, and they're getting into neighborhoods, they're getting into residential areas, and they're absolutely getting people stranded. There are people on their roofs waiting for rescue, and again, it is so reminiscent of how the scenes were back 12 years ago in Katrina. It's very sad to see this. The rates at the increasing death tolls, it's increasing, and we expect to see, sadly, and hopefully not, but we are expecting to see a few more deaths to be coming out of this. And again, this storm is not over, even though it is down to a depression and it is moving its way through Louisiana and up through Mississippi and going forward. The rainfall threat, again, as David had shown you in that graphic, is still very much still there, very much alive, and it's going to make a big issue for search and rescue to go forth. It's going to be a hard one for some of these areas, and not only with the rainfall, but there's the issues with overflowing of the dams and reservoirs, and it's already overflowing quite a few of these areas. They are opening the floodgates. Our Army Corps of Engineers are working on getting that flow of water out. Sadly, that flow of water into is going into neighborhoods and flooding out the areas, which is not good. But again, it's a necessary task to save a larger area from being impact higher some more. So that is that issue. Also, the issue of possible tornado risk still remains, and as we've seen through this storm, there has been some tornado activity that has occurred throughout areas of Texas, Louisiana. I think even as far as Mississippi might have had some tornadic stuff as well. So again, this storm is just completely terrible for all areas, not just for civilians, but for the search and rescue teams. For recovery, it's going to take a long time for recovery to take place. Maybe months, if not a couple of years, before everything is set back to normal. And it's going to be a long and hard process going forward for Texas and parts of Louisiana. There's going to be some more events taking place as we go through the hurricane season, even possibly another event taking place next week, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the update, that will be impacting the more or less the same general areas as Harvey has impacted. Now, again, we're not totally confident yet on how much of an impact or exactly where those impacts will take place. But we know that the general area of Texas and Louisiana will be getting increased rainfall from this tropical system. And again, a little bit later, I'll go more into details with that. I do know that the Army and Marine Corps has been sending military aid in from different parts of the states. They are sending 2 ships from Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia down to that area, sending down a helicopter carrier and landing ship so they could get supplies into the area, and heavy-duty helicopters to work through the conditions and help to rescue more and more people in those trapped areas. Yep, alrighty. So the other thing too is that we have people who are trying to get out of these areas, and as David has mentioned, I would suggest anyone that is trying to get out, if you do find yourself in a flooded area, do not, and I repeat, do not drive your vehicle through those flooded areas, as you could very easily get trapped in a more deeper flooded area, and you could potentially injure, if not kill yourself that way. So be cautious how you move about. If conditions are still not eased up yet, listen to your local officials. Let them tell you when the all clear is given. Let them tell you where areas are more clear to move about. Listen for their advice on evacuation routes and heed to that. Do not take matters into your own hands. And okay, David, don't take matters into your own hands and drive yourself through flooded areas. Mind yourself for also the wildlife creatures out there, alligators, snakes, whatever. Keep your eye out on that, and look out for downed power lines, anything like that. Stay far away from there. if you need assistance, call your emergency services, get a hold of people, let them know that you need to be evacuated. They'll come and get you in due time, hopefully quicker rather than later. Um, David, you wanna add anything else
Yes,
to that?
currently on the screen is some very detailed information, and I would recommend to the viewers that they have a look at the Weather Prediction Centre. The stats are available, a breakdown in rainfall, the strongest wind, and it was the Cedar Bayou at FM 1942 recorded a staggering 51.88 inches. And secondly, Clear Creek, I-45, 49.40, Dayton, 49, Marys Creek, Winding Road, 49, Beaumont, Port Arthur, 47 decimals 20, and Adam, I believe that the National Weather Service earlier yesterday actually toured, considering my location over here on the east coast of Australia. I wasn't 100% sure what the location was. It was actually, I think, Port Arthur. That was the worst area impacted on, wasn't it?
Well, it is the worst area currently being impacted on, and again, the as far as I'm aware, the rates of water is still increasing in that area of Port Arthur, and that's still going to increase some throughout today. It has, I believe, it has increased overnight, and it's an ongoing situation as it is. Again, the system is not done. David, can you continue?
Okay, I've just had to cut in for a minute. Just continuing on to what Adam was saying. Rainfall still remains a critical issue. The reference to the National Weather Service, they actually toured the Port Arthur. I'm positive it was Port Arthur, and they captured some video. It was available on the National Weather Service on one of their Twitter feeds. I'm not sure what station it was or what office, but whilst Adam fixes something up, and okay, you're back. Adam, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit.
Yep.
I would like to say a special thank you to Mark Suter. I think I've got his surname
Sudduth,
right.
yes, Mark Sudduth
Yeah.
at hurricanetrack.com.
Yeah, for allowing the Hurricane or the Cayman Hurricane Centre to access his channel, and I do have some footage that I have recorded, and two cars, Adam, driving down this road that was flooded, and one of them got through. The second one should not have attempted it. But that reinforces what Adam said. Avoid travelling in flood water, because you only need 0.6 of a inch or centimetres.
Well, again, 0.6 of an inch, and you could be sliding off a road. You may travel over an area of area of where it's flooded, and again, you may think that it's just a little bit of water, but again, there's other parts of the roads that do dip down deeper, and of course, there are other areas that look like it's a fairly shallow road, but or higher level road, and it's not as flooded, and you get in there and the whole entire car sinks into flooded waters. And again, that we have seen scenes where that has happened. Yes, so we have ourselves tropical storm Harvey here, as you see on the satellite imagery. Harvey has really popped up and really gotten itself going. It was initially initiated by the National Hurricane Center yesterday as a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. So, didn't even wait to become a depression or a weak tropical storm. It went straight up to 50, and it's going. And it's just about getting its way to hurricane status. The latest advisory, which is the 5 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time advisory, location was at 16.5 north, 32.9 west, or about 590 miles west of the Cabo Verde Islands. Max winds is now at 70 miles per hour. Its present movement is off towards the west at 12 and has a minimum central pressure of 997 millibars. This system, again, having been through the Cabo Verde Islands and now west of there, it has many miles ahead of it before any possible impacts to any land. First area to keep watch, though, would be the Eastern Caribbean. Just going to go ahead and bring this up here, which is the official forecast track by the National Hurricane Center. And a couple things to point out, and I'll discuss through the forecasting theory behind all of this. And also want to make just another quick apologies. You may hear a little bit of rumbling in the background noise. There is currently thunderstorms outside my HQ, and there's a bit of rumbling going on. So
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, so never mind that. Let's continue here. So again, this is the forecast cone here, and what is generally expected is a more or less west-northwest track, or eventual west-northwest track, or maybe slightly north of due west track within the next few days over part of the weekend, and then it will shift west and then west-southwest. Now, this is very interesting, as this doesn't happen too often. However, what I will point out is that as Harvey, as a tropical disturbance, low-level invest, was tracking across the main development region, it too had a sort of similar track where it sort of moved west-northwest and then eventually dipped again towards the west-southwest before continuing west into the Caribbean. The other thing to take note is that, as you could see by the M's in the middle of the cone, this thing is indeed expected to become a major hurricane. This will make the second major hurricane of the Atlantic season, and will make concern for the regions in the Western Atlantic. So, yeah. to give you an idea on the forecasting reasoning, is that what's happening at present is that we have a high pressure ridge to the north of Harvey that's sort of inducing this west or west northwesterly track. We do have the old frontal boundary located off the east coast, and again attached to Harvey and what was potential tropical cyclone number 10, which didn't really come much to fruition, however, is making its way up and out. The other thing that is going to be kicking this system, the trough moves out and the high builds back in. But very interestingly enough, is that the high is going to orient itself northeast to southwest, and it's going to be strengthening and pushing further southwest. So instead of the usual high pressure system that you usually see that has a general wind flow as such, as marked out here, what's going to happen is that it's going to be more like this. Again, northeast to southwest, and as it does so, and as it strengthens, it's going to help to push the system down west-southwest. Now, this is quite a bit of a concern, as you know, the further south it does go, the more impacts that could be likely for the area of the Eastern Caribbean or Northeastern Caribbean here. As again, this will be the area that will be likely impacted first within the next 6 or 7 days, give or take. This is a 5-day cone. Extend that out, days 6, 7, this general area. There is a little bit of a spread between the forecast guidance on exactly what it will do beyond that point. Again, there's several things that need to take place, several things that may take place or may not take place. We'll get further into that as we go through. But one thing I am concerned about is, again, a major hurricane, if it gets into the Eastern Caribbean, there are some long-range forecasts that are suggesting that this may become another Gulf of Mexico threat, or Caribbean to Gulf of Mexico threat. If not, then it would be Bahamas, Florida, and off the southeast coast. Again, there is a fair, decent spread throughout the models. But one model in particular that I would want to mention, though, if there's any model to mention, it would be this one, would be the European model. And again, the European model is the most accurate model out there and more reliable than other models. There's the GFS, however, since its recent upgrade, the GFS hasn't really been performing as great. Again, with new models, little tweaks, and eventually it'll get there. It's still got some more tweaking to do, but it does show the system, and it kind of takes it a little bit kind of off-ish. It's probably the most eastern track, or one of the most eastern tracks out of all the models. But again, I digress. Here is the European model, and again, this is basically day 6, day 7 time frame, and here we go. After its west-southwest movement, it makes its way into the Eastern Caribbean, again as a very powerful hurricane. And here, just to point out, here is Puerto Rico, here is Hispaniola, here's Jamaica, here's Cuba, here's the United States, and the Yucatan, and this is the other area of interest, which I'll mention in a few minutes. And so that is landmass, and just to give you the whole synoptic, here's your high pressure area, here's your high pressure ridge, here's a second trough that's sort of coming in. Whether or not it takes this system northeast or the system is able to turn around, we'll have to wait and see. Plenty of time to watch for that But again, with this pattern, and again with the forecast here, it is forecasting this to make a much more further west track. For this particular run, had it going over Hispaniola, Cuba, and ending up here, and likely going to be ending up into the Gulf of Mexico. One thing I do want to make a important point is that the European model has, among other models as well, has been trending further south and west with track. An earlier run where the European had it going over Puerto Rico, north of Hispaniola, and towards Florida, and earlier runs had it further out as such. So the trend is further south and west, and if that does continue, that does pose a concern because, again, with its present track here, if it goes over the islands, it will bring down the intensity of the storm, and luckily when it gets to if it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it won't be as strong. However, with this trend further south and west, if this does continue, probably would be looking at it passing south of Hispaniola, maybe towards Jamaica, somewhere with the Northwest Caribbean, probably staying offshore here. And again, that would produce a greater concern, not only for the Caribbean islands here, but also for the eventual track into the Gulf of Mexico, again, providing that the trend does continue. There is other forecasts, again, the GFS, which has a track much further north and again kind of pulls it out. Again, I'm having a little bit of a hard time believing it, again, with this strong high pressure ridge that's expected to set up. You don't really get storms punching through high pressure systems. You usually goes around the high pressure systems. However, the GFS is showing that a upper level low is expected to develop some along here and thus eating away at a part of the ridge, thus allowing it to do that. Again, I'm not so confident on buying that, as GFS again has issues, and one of the many things, despite over amplifying the troughs on the East Coast, over amplifying storms, one of the things is over amplifying the upper level lows and underestimating the high pressure ridges. So again, there's a lot of models out there, a lot of spread. Again, days to go before we get to any impacts. Again, this 6-7 days, and again, expected to be around this general area by day 5. So it is something that we will need to keep a close eye on. And just to give you a general graphic to look at, beyond the 5 days, this is the possible scenarios that are out there. So again, either off into the west towards the Caribbean or just missing outside the Caribbean. And we'll have to watch how this progresses, and it will be needed to watch closely. So just quickly on to the next system here. The models are picking up on another system in the Gulf of Mexico. As a matter of fact, the area of interest is actually starting off right now, right there. The National Hurricane Center is giving this a 20% chance over the next 5 days to develop. It is expected to track generally northwards or northeastwards. And again, whether or not it makes itself a landfall through here or whether it skirts the area here and then comes back around, we're, again, a few days away. We'll know for sure. But one thing that is somewhat certain is that we're likely looking for more rainfall in these already affected areas here in Texas and Louisiana. So that is a very grave concern by the National Hurricane Center and other local weather offices in the area. Again, I'll have some more details on that later on the update later today. More on Irma and more on Harvey later. But again, that is pretty much it from me and David here for Cayman Hurricane Center. We'll be joining you later today.